Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest founded her own real estate brokerage, and she is the author of the personal development book, Breaking Boxes, Dismantling the Metaphorical Boxes that Bind Us. Her name is Betsy Pepine, and my interview with Betsy will follow the note-taking sounds. Betsy Pepine, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Oh, happy to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Oh, okay. I am a broker of real estate, serial entrepreneur in really all things real estate. Live in North Central Florida. And I'm a single mom of 2 children and 2 rescue pups. And I'm 56 and just recently wrote my first book.
Before we talk about your book, I'm going to talk about your work in the real estate industry. Your real estate brokerage is Pepine Realty, and I think you own some other real estate businesses as well. But what is it like to be a real estate businesswoman in Florida, and what motivated you to enter the real estate industry?
You know, I entered the industry 20 years ago. It was a career change for me. A series of life events, including a corporate layoff in my prior industry, which was the pharmaceutical industry, and a divorce kind of made me reevaluate where I was going. And I wasn't passionate about what I was doing in the pharmaceutical industry, and I just felt like it was the ideal time to make a pivot. So I did pivot into the real estate industry because it was something that I had been exposed to. My parents have always owned real estate. I took a great class in business school where we could rehab homes and sell them to cost-burdened families. So I got to see the impact that a house can make on a family's life. And so it was always just a kind of a back calling for me. And so I decided to try it. And if my plan B was if it didn't work out, then I would go and work for a large healthcare system here in my town. But fortunately, I loved it. And after a couple of years, got my broker license and then just started to grow the primary business, which is the brokerage, and then ancillary businesses that support the brokerage after that.
Your nonfiction book is titled Breaking Boxes, Dismantling the Metaphorical Boxes that Bind Us. Without spoiling too much about your nonfiction book, what is it about?
It's about my journey of getting out, becoming aware of, negotiating, and then exiting boxes that no longer served me. And so boxes could be, in my definition, is the attitudes, the opinions, the beliefs of maybe our family of origin, maybe of the industry that we're in, maybe based on our gender, maybe based on our role that we play in people's lives, like the good mom role. What does it mean to be a good mom or a good wife or a good daughter, good husband, that kind of thing. But we have so many different external forces that we interact with throughout our lives, telling us how to be, who to be, what to be. And sometimes we don't stop to question, is this really serving me? Is this what I want? And so that's what the book is about, is the exploration of that. The reason I wrote it, the reason why this topic came into my life was about, I'd say 7 or 8 years ago now. I just found myself unhappy and I couldn't figure out why. On paper, it looked like I was very successful, and I had always equated success with happiness, and came to understand through a variety of different modalities, yoga, meditation, therapy, bioenergetics work, EMDR, that one, success doesn't equal happiness, but I was just feeling confined by these boxes and had to work on a way to extricate myself out of the ones that no longer served me.
Why do people stay in their metaphorical boxes, and how can that be a destructive mentality to do so?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people stay in for a couple of reasons. One is they're not even aware that they're in a box. I equate it to almost like when you bring home a baby from the hospital, you put it in a bassinet, which is like the first box that we're exposed to, physical box that we're exposed to. And we keep it in the bassinet to keep it safe, right? The baby doesn't know it's in a box, doesn't know there's life outside the box. And then as you grow, you get to be a toddler. Your parents move you into a crib. The crib has slats. You can see through the slats. If you're agile enough, you can start climbing up over the top of the side. You understand. You start to see that there's life outside of the box that you're put in. And that's same with us as adults. Is that these metaphorical boxes? You have to first be aware that you're even in one, which means that you understand that there's options outside of it. So people stay in perhaps because they're not even aware that there's choices outside of the boxes that they're in. And then even if they are aware, usually if people are staying in boxes that no longer serve them, and I include myself in that group, it's a fear-based response. So fear is the obstacle, and it could be fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of change. Those are the three big fears that I see in my own life and in others that keeps people stuck where they are and afraid to make the change. But your question is what happens if you don't? I think I started feeling an incredible misalignment between who I felt like I was born to be and what I was doing. And I felt that subconsciously at the beginning and more consciously as the feelings grew and the more I became accustomed to leaning into my feelings and acknowledging them. So I think that's why we have to get we if we want to lead a fulfilling and authentic life, I think we have to get in touch with those feelings and really try to move towards authenticity. And that requires getting out of boxes that were designed for perhaps others, maybe at a different time in your life, a different period in our culture, and start exiting those that no longer serve you.
Were there any metaphorical boxes that you've had to break out of yourself? And if so, how have you navigated that?
I mean, there's been numerous ones. The biggest and earliest one for me was just the expectations in my family to become a physician. That was just a kind of a given in our family for a variety of reasons, and I was the only one in my family not to take that route. And I think that's why I went to the pharmaceutical industry because I felt like it at least I was kind of it's like a hybrid. You know, they want me to be a physician. I don't want to be a physician, but I'll stay in your industry. And I was very unhappy. So that was the first box that I had to navigate, and I had to wrap my head around the fact that in my particular family, shifting out of that role and in that industry was going to result in a loss of not of social, but a loss of status in my family. And it did. And I had to be prepared for that and be okay with that. And my family has since come around, but at the beginning it was very hard for me because I knew that I, I felt that I was less than in their eyes because I chose a route that they couldn't understand why anybody wouldn't want. Yeah, so that was probably the biggest box I've had to overcome, but various different boxes. You know, gender is a big one for everybody, whether you're male or female. Um, I've been given positions, flat out told I'm being given this position because, like a board position at a bank because of my gender, not because of the impact my businesses have made on the community. And so we come across these boxes all the time. I mean, even in my family life, when I started having children, I didn't even understand the good mom box and what that meant. I didn't even know that was a box until I had children and saw how so many other moms, were judging their peers on their parenting and were they a good parent? Were they a good mom? And what that entailed. And I definitely went against the grain on a lot of my parenting philosophies because I truly believe that's what was best for the long-term interest of my children. But at the same time, I sacrificed that good mom label. I had many people question some of the things that I did because I didn't go the traditional route that a lot of parents did. So yeah, so those are some examples of the boxes that I faced.
What motivated you to become passionate about helping others break out of their metaphorical boxes?
That's a great question. So, my whole goal in life, in my businesses and in my life, is to improve and empower the lives of others. And that's our tagline in our companies. That's my personal philosophy. And so, and I usually equate that to my business, but when this was becoming such a big part of my life, and when I shared my stories with others and they would share back with me areas that they felt confined in, I thought, oh my goodness, I have to help other people on a broader scale than just people that I know. And so, my goal, I remember my editor asked me, what is your goal? And my goal was to help just one person. It was worth the effort. If I could change the life of one person, if one person read the book and thought about their life in a different way, and it encouraged them to make a move towards a more fulfilling and authentic life, then my efforts would have been worth it. And I'm so glad I did, because from my feedback, I have impacted lives in that way. And so that's why I wrote the book.
How long from start to finish did it take you to write Breaking Boxes?
So when a big part of, and this is my first book, so I'm a newbie, but a big part of it was figuring out exactly what I wanted to write about, what angle. So, but once I understood what I was going to write about, and I said, okay, I laid out, my goal was to not make it something that looked like a chore. Like I wanted to do it. I wanted to be excited about writing. And so I committed to writing an hour a day. An hour a day got me about a page a day, 5 days a week. I hired a writing coach where I had to submit 20 pages I don't remember what the frequency was, and that kept me accountable. And it took me a year to write the book. And then at that stage, it took another 9 months to get it from finished manuscript to seeing it on the shelf. The editing, the copywriting, all that stuff, the graphic layout, everything. That took another 9 months.
What was the easiest part and the hardest part about writing a nonfiction book for you?
I'm trying to think. That's hard because there's a lot in that question. The hardest thing for me, not so much because it was nonfiction, but this book is nonfiction about my life. So the hardest part was that because I exposed myself in a way that I never done before. So I felt very vulnerable, almost like naked in front of your peers. Everyone knows me from a business perspective, and I'm very private in my personal life, and so it just felt very, I was just very scared, and pushing that submit button at the end to my publisher was the hardest thing that I had to do. I sat on that for about a week because I just was so scared about being so exposed. So that was the hardest thing for me. Not so much that it was nonfiction, because I could have written a nonfiction book on how to build a real estate brokerage, and that wouldn't have had any kind of vulnerability to it. But because it was my personal life, that's what made it hard. The easiest thing, I think, for me, I have a concept. I mean, it's not my concept. It's a book, and I love it. And the concept is who, not how. And so get the right who's on your bus, and understanding that you can stay in your lane. And so that's why I hired a business coach. She was a developmental editor, so she helped me make sure that my stories flowed and that they made sense to somebody who knows nothing about me. And then I hired a editor who then, once the book was done, I didn't try to edit it myself. I hired an editor to edit my book. And I actually hired a second editor overseas because from what I had been told, and it's true, a lot of people buy your books that are not in this country, and they may not, you can't see it yourself, but they may not, what we take for granted that somebody will know, a reader from another country, an editor from another country would be able to point out, wait a minute, you need to clarify this. We're not going to know what you mean if somebody from this country buys the book. So I did that. But the whole concept, the easiest thing is seeing how many. I mean, I just didn't know. I was so naive to the industry, but there's a person for every step of the way if you want to employ their services, that are experts at what they do. And so first time go around, I decided to do it that way, and I'm so glad I did.
Is Breaking Boxes independently, traditionally, or hybrid published? What was it like getting your book published?
Yeah. So I started out with, I joined I can't remember what it's called, publisher. Warehouse, Publisher Weekly or Publisher Warehouse or something. It's a online portal, and you can find agents that way. And so I did that, and I submitted my manuscript to about probably 20 agents. I heard back from one, and it was a rejection. And I thought, my goodness, I'm not gonna, I want this out. Like, I don't want to wait a year, 2 years, because what I had been told, and I don't know if it's true, is even if they accept you, sometimes if their schedule for the year is booked, your book might not even be released for another year. And so I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go the hybrid route. So again, who, not how. So I hired a company that they did the layout for me, like the whole, once you have a book that's in a Word document, you got to get it to look like a book, formatting and layout, the cover design, the back cover, all of that, like the testimonials, all those things. And so I hired somebody to do that. And also that company also helped set up the Ingram Sparks account and the Amazon accounts and KDP, and just making sure that it was where it was supposed to be, because I didn't know anything about how that worked at the time. So first go around, that's what I did. And I love doing it that way, because then now I feel like I could do it myself if I choose to, if I write another book. But the first time around for me, I would rather pay someone to do that and teach me, so that I know how to do it the next time. So that's how I did it. So that was a hybrid publisher. And yeah, it was a great experience.
I have one final question, and it's about a charity you run that's called Pepine Gives.
Mhm.
And this is a charity that helps families that face housing insecurity. What
Mhm.
is housing insecurity for our listeners that might not be familiar with that subject? And how does your charity help those who are facing housing insecurity?
Okay, that's a great question. So housing insecurity is when you have difficulty based on your income purchasing a home. So the analysts look at median incomes for counties and median housing prices. And so when the median income doesn't support the median housing prices, you have a disparity of burden. And so they call families who can't afford it based on, if you can't afford the median priced home in your county because your income is lower than the median income, there is a cost disparity. And I happen to live in the highest cost burden county in the state of Florida. And so my nonprofit, Pepine Gives, we have a partnership with Habitat for Humanity, and we partner with Habitat to build houses for those cost burden families. It's not a handout, it's a hand up. These families have to be qualified. They have to go through educational training for not only how to maintain a home properly, but also how do you maintain a financial budget for the house. Really teeing up these new homeowners for success. And then they also have to commit to 250 man and woman hours working directly on their homes or other Habitat homes. So they're very invested in the process. And again, the whole goal is to tee these families up for success, because the last thing we want to do is have to foreclose on the families.
Betsy, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were a wonderful guest to interview.
Oh, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
It was amazing to interview Betsy about her book and her work in real estate. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.